Pacing, I'm afraid.
And every time I am so sorry.
Lewis Hamilton just suffered a terrifying crash in Abu Dhabi, and it shattered more than just carbon fiber. Ferrari confirmed structural damage, compromised floor balance, and a total loss of setup data just minutes before qualifying. The result? Hamilton was knocked out in Q1 again, and now starts 16th in his final race with the Scuderia. Subscribe now, because what just happened may go down as the most painful ending to any F1 chapter in recent history. In what was supposed to be a ceremonial final Grand Prix weekend with Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton's Abu Dhabi campaign took a brutal turn. Just minutes into FP3, Hamilton lost the rear end of the SF-25 at turn 14. The car snapped on corner entry, bottomed out, and spun violently into the barrier, nose first, then tail. The red flags came out instantly. What looked at first like a routine off-track moment quickly escalated into a full-blown mechanical crisis. The front wing was destroyed, but that was just the start. Ferrari confirmed within the hour that the floor, rear suspension assembly, and several aerocritical components had suffered structural damage. The crash completely invalidated Hamilton's planned setup run for the final practice, which was meant to simulate qualifying pace on soft tires. With no chance to gather final setup data, Ferrari was left scrambling, relying solely on overnight simulations and Leclerc's feedback to rebuild the car around a neutral baseline. Time was the enemy. From the moment the car returned to the garage, the Ferrari mechanics had less than 2 hours to disassemble the chassis, fit a backup floor, recalibrate the suspension, and rewire sensors, all while ensuring the car remained within park-firm regulations. That is an impossible environment for precision. Normally, a team needs laps to verify aero balance, brake feel, and tire window alignment. Ferrari had none. The rebuild was rushed, reactive, and missing the critical feedback loop that practice provides. The biggest loss was the floor setup. The SF-25 relies heavily on ground effect downforce generated by a highly sensitive aerodynamic floor structure. When that is swapped without calibration, the entire balance of the car can shift unpredictably. In Hamilton's case, Ferrari had no time to measure ride height variation, rake balance, or yaw stability, all critical factors for consistent cornering and traction. That left Hamilton entering qualifying with a car whose real-world behavior was completely unknown. As Q1 began, it became clear the rebuilt car was not working. Hamilton's first-timed lap saw the rear of the SF-25 sliding mid-corner and snapping on exits. He was nearly 0.2 slower than expected in Sector 2 alone. On team radio, he reported that the car felt twitchy under braking and impossible on throttle. The engineers gave no solution because with no FP3 data, they had none. He went out for second run, but despite pushing to the absolute limit, he missed the Q2 cut by just 0.8 thousandths of a second. What makes this more painful is the contrast across the garage. Charles Leclerc, running the original setup and with a clean FP3, made it to Q3 and qualified comfortably in the top 5. The difference? Preparation and stability. Hamilton had neither. The crash didn't just take out parts, it deleted Ferrari's entire plan for his final qualifying run in red. It turned a potential farewell performance into a desperate salvage operation that failed before it started. This wasn't just another Q1 exit, it was the symbolic collapse of Hamilton's Ferrari journey. After a season of near misses, technical misfires, and strategic frustration, Abu Dhabi was supposed to be a chance for closure. Instead, it delivered chaos. From the moment of impact in turn 14, the weekend shifted from celebration to survival, and now Hamilton faces his final race with the Scuderia starting 16th. In car, he barely got to drive before it let him down one last time. From the first lap in Q1, Hamilton's performance looked compromised. His initial Sector 1 time was already 0.3 off the leading pace, with clear hesitation on turn-in and instability on exit. The rebuilt SF-25 lacked rotation through turns 1 and 2, forcing Hamilton to make micro-corrections just to keep the rear stable. On the data trace, his steering inputs were jagged, indicating he was fighting the car's balance rather than attacking the lap. That early loss of momentum put him on the back foot immediately. Sector 2, which demands confidence and precision through flowing corners, exposed the bigger issue, aerodynamic imbalance. Hamilton's minimum speeds in turns 5 and 6 were noticeably lower than in FP2, and even more telling was his throttle application. He lifted mid-corner in sections where Leclerc was flat. Ferrari's engineers later confirmed that the new floor wasn't sealing properly under yaw, which likely disrupted the underbody airflow. That meant less downforce when the car was cornering a critical problem on a track like Yas Marina. On the straights, the problem didn't get better. Hamilton's SF-25 showed a drop in terminal velocity through the Sector 3 DRS zone nearly 6 kilometers per hour slower than Leclerc. That suggests the rebuild added unintended drag, possibly from misaligned floor edges or increased ride height. This robbed Hamilton of the few opportunities he had to make up time lost in corners. In a field this competitive, even small aerodynamic inefficiencies become terminal. Tire performance also worked against him. With no FP3 long runs, Ferrari had no real-world reference for how the soft compound would behave with Hamilton's rebuilt suspension and altered aero balance. On his first Q1 push lap, the tire temps shot up too quickly due to sliding, especially in the rear. That caused surface overheating by the time he entered the final sector, reducing grip right when it mattered most. His rear tires began to fade, which is why his exit from turn 19 was sluggish and cost him the lap. On the second run, Hamilton improved, but barely. He cleaned up the steering inputs, braked earlier to stabilize the entry, and stayed tighter to the apexes. But the raw grip still wasn't there. His best lap was a 1 minute, 24.3, missing Q2 by just 8 thousandths of a second. That gap is razor thin, but in reality, the crash had already taken away more than enough performance to bury him. He may have driven flawlessly, but the car underneath him wasn't capable of delivering. Compared to the midfield, Hamilton's car wasn't just slower, it was unpredictable. Hülkenberg, Tsunoda, and Bottas all ran cleaner laps in cars with far less downforce potential. Yet they each found consistency Hamilton couldn't. The rebuilt Ferrari didn't respond the same way lap to lap. Onboard footage confirmed what telemetry suggested. Corner exits were unstable, braking was inconsistent, and rear traction was unreliable. These aren't driver errors, they're mechanical symptoms of a car rebuilt in panic without calibration. Leclerc's data proved what could have been. He drove with a similar setup to what Hamilton was meant to use, and the SF-25 handled predictably. His cornering speeds were consistent, energy deployment matched simulation expectations, and tire behavior was within the operating window. Had Hamilton not crashed, his performance would have likely matched or closely followed Leclerc's, potentially putting him into Q3. Instead, a single impact wiped out an entire qualifying program, leaving him 16 positions behind and facing a brutal Sunday. The heart of Ferrari's technical collapse this weekend lies in what the crash did to the floor. In modern Formula One, the floor is no longer just a flat piece of carbon, it's an active aerodynamic structure. It generates the majority of the car's downforce by channeling low-pressure air under the chassis and sealing it with precise ride height control. Once Hamilton's original floor was destroyed in FP3, Ferrari had to fit a backup component that hadn't been aeromapped for this circuit's unique demands. That immediately broke the link between simulation and reality. Unlike wings, which can be adjusted in the garage, floors are passive aerodynamic elements. Their effectiveness depends entirely on how they interact with the surface of the track through vertical compression. Ferrari's SF-25 had been calibrated all weekend with a specific rake angle, suspension preload, and diffuser stall threshold. Swapping the floor without realigning those variables left Hamilton driving a car that was likely out of its optimal aero window. That explains the rear instability and inconsistent grip under lateral load, especially through Sector 2. The suspension geometry was another key issue. After the crash, Ferrari replaced several rear-end components, including the pushrod and toe link assemblies. These parts directly affect how the tires behave under braking and traction. In theory, mechanics can rebuild geometry using factory measurements, but on race weekends, final tuning is done through track-specific corner weighting and damper adjustments. Hamilton's car missed that entire fine-tuning process. As a result, the rear suspension was mechanically out of sync with the aero load it was meant to support. This mismatch showed up clearly in the car's braking behavior. Hamilton reported early rear locking and poor stability under deceleration, particularly into turns 5 and 6. These are high-load corners that depend on consistent weight transfer and a balanced aero platform. But without proper damping or alignment, the car's response was delayed and unpredictable. That forced Hamilton to brake earlier and modulate throttle more gently, costing time at every corner entry and exit. The SF-25 is already sensitive in this area, and after the crash, it became borderline undrivable. Ferrari's engineers were flying blind in Q1. They had no usable FP3 telemetry from Hamilton's car, which meant no updated tire degradation curves, no brake temperature baselines, and no feedback on ride height stability. All setup changes were made based on simulations or Leclerc's data. But with different driving styles and crash damage components, those references became unreliable. For a car as complex and interdependent as the SF25, removing just one link in the setup chain can make the entire structure collapse. Another factor was software. Ferrari's energy deployment, brake migration, and differential maps are all adapted session by session based on tire behavior and load distribution. With no updated physical data, Hamilton's car was running generic profiles instead of optimized ones. That affects how the car rotates mid-corner, how it responds on exit, and how it recovers under battery deployment. In a normal session, those systems are tuned lap by lap. In this case, Hamilton entered qualifying with a digital setup designed for a car that no longer existed. Ultimately, what we saw in Q1 wasn't a driver off the pace, it was a driver forced into a compromised machine. The floor wasn't sealed, the suspension wasn't balanced, and the software wasn't mapped for real-world conditions. Ferrari did what they could with the time they had, but it wasn't enough. Hamilton went into qualifying with a car built on guesswork, not data. In Formula One, especially at the sharp end of the grid, that's a guaranteed path to elimination.